The door clicked shut behind her as she stepped inside, kicking off her heels. Another long day at the office, another late night, justified with excuses she no longer had to rehearse. She had done this before. Walked through this same door, smiled at her husband, kissed him on the cheek while pretending everything was the same. It had become second nature, balancing two lives, keeping secrets tucked away between emails and after-hours meetings. But tonight felt different. The house was silent. No sound of the TV in the background, no hum of the kitchen appliances. Just the stillness of a place that no longer felt like home. Then she saw him. He was sitting at the dining table, his hands resting on the smooth wooden surface, her phone in front of him. The screen was dark now, but she knew. He had seen everything. Her stomach dropped. Her fingers curled around the strap of her bag as she forced herself to stay calm, to act normal. Maybe he didn't see much. Maybe there was still a way to fix this. "You're home early," she said, forcing a smile. He didn't answer. His eyes, dark and unreadable, flickered up to meet hers. Her heart pounded in her chest. "Is everything okay?" Still, he said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. She had spent months crafting the perfect lies, covering her tracks, convincing herself that she was in control. But now, with her phone sitting in front of him like a loaded gun, she realized just how wrong she had been. He finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "You left your phone unlocked." A chill ran down her spine. She swallowed hard, shifting on her feet. "And?" His fingers tapped against the table, slow and deliberate. "And I read your messages." Her breath hitched. Her mind raced, trying to remember what was there, what he could have seen. She had deleted most of the conversations, covered her tracks. But had she missed something? A single text? A name? She forced out a laugh, shaky and unnatural. "You went through my phone?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't have to. The notifications kept popping up." Her stomach twisted. Every carefully constructed lie, every excuse she had prepared felt useless now. He knew. "I don't know what you think you saw," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. His hand curled into a fist on the table. "I saw enough." She couldn't breathe. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, shaking his head. "How long?" The question made her chest tighten. She opened her mouth, searching for the right words, the ones that might undo the damage, but nothing came out. He already knew the truth, and there was no way to take it back. The beginning of it all felt harmless. Her marriage was steady, predictable, comfortable. Her husband was a good man, kind, dependable, the type who remembered her favorite coffee and always made sure her car had enough gas. There was love between them, real love, but over the years it had settled into something quiet. No surprises, no urgency, no rush of excitement. She never set out to look for something else. It started at work, long hours, back-to-back meetings, nights spent at the office finishing projects that never seemed to end. The stress piled up, and home felt like another place where expectations waited for her. And then there was him, her boss, confident, charismatic, the kind of man who filled a room without trying. People listened when he spoke, leaned in closer, wanted his attention. He had a presence that made everything seem more exciting, more alive. And he noticed her. Not just in passing, not just as another employee, but really noticed her. It was in the way he complimented her work, how he asked for her opinion in meetings when others overlooked her, the way he lingered when they spoke, his voice dropping just slightly, making her feel like she was the only person in the room. The first mistake wasn't obvious. A conversation that lasted longer than it should have. A lingering glance that neither of them pulled away from. a joke that felt more personal than professional. She told herself it was nothing, just harmless attention, just work. But then came the late nights, the "we should grab dinner since we're working so late" invitations, the meetings that turned into drinks at the bar, where the lines between professional and personal blurred into something she didn't want to define. The first time he touched her, his hand resting on her lower back as he leaned in to talk, she didn't move away. The first time he told her she was beautiful, she laughed, shook her head, but she didn't tell him to stop. The first time he texted her late at night, she hesitated before replying, but she still did. And the first time they kissed, she didn't pull away. She told herself it wasn't real, that it was just stress, just the thrill of something new, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, she knew. She had crossed the line, and there was no going back. Every morning, she woke up next to. Her husband kissed his cheek and whispered a soft, "Good morning." It was the same routine they had shared for years, but now something felt different, forced, hollow, a habit rather than an expression of love. By the time she reached the office, everything shifted. The moment she stepped inside, her heart raced for a different reason. The air was heavier with unspoken words, lingering glances, and the quiet thrill of knowing that somewhere in this building he was waiting for her. Their meetings became something else entirely. They sat too close, their hands brushing accidentally, but never really by accident. Conversations drifted away from work, slipping into personal confessions, subtle flirtations. She was careful at first. A locked phone, a different name saved in her contacts, texts deleted, calls answered in hushed tones, excuses lined up before she even needed them. Late meeting tonight. The project deadline got pushed up. I'll be home after dinner. Work trip next weekend, just a quick one. At home, she made sure everything looked the same. Dinners were cooked, laundry was folded, the house was clean. She played the role of the perfect wife, keeping her voice light, making sure her husband never had a reason to look too closely. But he did. He started noticing the way she kept her phone closer, the way her laughter sounded different when she texted, the way she avoided his eyes when she walked through the door, her makeup still fresh, even though it was nearly midnight. "You've been working late a lot." His voice was casual, but the weight of it made her pulse quicken. "Yeah, it's been crazy at the office." She forced herself to yawn, to seem exhausted, to make him believe that the only thing keeping her away from him was work. But the truth was, the deception wasn't exhausting. The guilt was. It crept into the quiet moments, the way he reached for her hand and she hesitated, the way he kissed her goodbye in the morning, and she turned her face just slightly so their lips barely met. Yet, no matter how heavy the guilt became, she couldn't stop. She told herself she would, that it wasn't worth the risk, that she still loved her husband, that this was just a distraction, that if she walked away now, she could still fix things. But she never did, because every time she tried to pull away, he pulled her back. One night, a co-worker caught her lingering by the elevator, waiting for him to follow. "Be careful." The warning was quiet, but firm. She froze. Secrets like this don't stay buried forever. Her stomach twisted, her mind racing, but then a text appeared on her phone. His name. Same place after work. And despite everything, despite the risk, despite the guilt, she replied, "Yes." The house was quiet when she walked in, too quiet. The usual hum of the television was missing, the warm scent of dinner absent. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the way the air seemed heavier, in the way her heart pounded as she stepped further inside. Then she saw him. He was sitting at the dining table, her phone in front of him.
His hands were clasped together, his posture tense, his expression unreadable. The sight sent a cold wave of panic through her body. Her breath caught in her throat. She had been careful. She had deleted messages, covered her tracks, made sure her phone was always locked, always within reach. But something had gone wrong. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You're home early." No response. His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to her. A lump formed in her throat. Her hands instinctively reached for the strap of her bag, gripping it tightly as if that could anchor her to the moment, keep her from unraveling. "What's going on?" she asked, though deep down she already knew. He took a slow breath, exhaling through his nose. Then finally he spoke. "You left your phone unlocked." The words sent a chill down her spine. Her stomach twisted painfully. "And?" His jaw tightened. "And I read your messages." The room seemed to tilt. She forced out a small, breathless laugh, though nothing about this was funny. "You went through my phone?" "I didn't have to," he said, his voice sharp but controlled. "Your notifications kept popping up, over and over again." Her mouth went dry. She had deleted so many messages, covered her tracks so well, but all it took was one mistake, one message left unread, one careless moment. She stepped closer, reaching for the phone, but he placed his hand over it, stopping her. "Don't," he said quietly. Her pulse thundered in her ears. "It's not—" His fingers tapped against the table. "How long?" She froze. His voice was too calm, too steady. It was worse than if he had yelled, worse than if he had thrown accusations at her. She opened her mouth, searching for the right words, the ones that might undo the damage, but nothing came out. He nodded slowly, as if he had already expected this. "That's what—" I thought she swallowed hard, her chest tightening. "It's not what you think," she whispered, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Then tell me, what is it?" She hesitated for too long. His hand curled into a fist on the table, his knuckles white. "You were with him." Her breath hitched. He already knew the truth, and there was no way to take it back. The house was no longer a home. It was just walls, furniture, and air thick with silence. She could feel the weight of it, pressing down on her with every step she took. It was in the way he moved around her, mechanical, distant, like she was nothing more than a stranger passing through his space. Before, there had been warmth. His laughter used to fill the rooms, his touch had been soft, his voice had held something she never fully appreciated: love, security, devotion. Now there was only coldness. She tried to fix it. At first she thought if she apologized enough, if she showed him how sorry she was, he would forgive her. She told him over and over again that she hadn't meant to hurt him, that she would take it all back if she could, that she would do anything to make this right. But he never responded the way she wanted him to. Some nights he didn't respond at all. She would sit across from him at dinner, watching as he pushed his food around his plate, barely eating. The way he used to look at her, like she was his entire world, was gone. She hated that look in his eyes now, the emptiness. It was worse than anger. She would have preferred rage. At least anger meant he still felt something, that he still cared, but he didn't fight, he didn't yell, he didn't accuse. He just stopped caring. The bed they once shared felt bigger than before. She reached for him one night, desperate for something, for any sign that there was still a chance. Her fingers brushed against his arm, but he didn't turn toward her. He flinched, and that small movement shattered her. She turned away, staring at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing, knowing that he wasn't asleep,
just pretending. The days dragged on. She found herself watching him constantly, looking for a sign that he was still hers, that she could still fix this. But all she saw was a man who had already started slipping away, the man who had once been hers. The realization hit her like a knife to the gut. She thought she could have both lives, that she could hold on to the love and stability of her marriage while chasing the excitement and thrill of something forbidden. But she was never meant to have both. And now she was losing everything. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away. The space between them felt wider than ever, an unspoken barrier that she couldn't break through. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I'll do anything, just don't leave." He let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "Do you even hear yourself?" Her chest tightened. "I made a mistake." He scoffed. "A mistake?" His jaw clenched, his eyes dark with something she couldn't name. "Dropping your keys in the driveway is a mistake. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake." His voice dropped lower. This was a choice. Tears burned at the back of her eyes. "I didn't mean to." "Stop!" The word cut through the room like a knife. She swallowed hard, her fingers twisting together as she struggled to find something, anything that would make this right. "I love you," she choked out. "That hasn't changed." A bitter smile crossed his lips, but there was no warmth in it. "Maybe not for you." Her breath hitched. "I don't see you the same way anymore," he continued, "and I don't think I ever will." The weight of his words hit her like a punch to the chest. She thought she had prepared for this moment, thought she had steeled herself for the worst, but nothing could have prepared her for the finality in his voice, the way he said it like there was no hope left. She took a shaky step forward. "We can fix this. I swear we can." He cut her off with a sharp shake of his head. "You don't get it, do you?" His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw it. He had already let go. "I've spent weeks feeling like a fool, wondering what I did wrong, why you pulled away, why you stopped looking at me like you used to." He exhaled, his voice lower now, steadier. "And now I finally understand." She shook her head desperately. "No, you made your choice." His expression didn't change, his words final. "Now I'm making mine." Her heart pounded. He turned away. She felt the panic rise in her chest, the suffocating realization that this wasn't just an argument, not just a temporary fight. This was the end. She wanted to scream, to beg, to rewind time and erase every bad decision, every lie, every moment that had led them here, but he was already walking away. She called his name one last time. He didn't look back, and just like that, he was gone. The days blurred together, each one feeling heavier than the last. The house was quiet now, not just because he was gone, but because everything that made it feel like a home had disappeared with him. She woke up alone, in a bed that felt too big, too cold. The morning stretched on endlessly, the silence filling every empty space where his voice used to be. No more lazy Sunday mornings, no more coffee waiting for her on the counter, no more familiar warmth beside her at night. She had thought time would make it easier, that eventually the weight of it all would fade. But time didn't heal things. It only made the regret settle deeper into her bones. She avoided places they used to go together. The cafe where they used to sit and talk for hours. The grocery store where he always reached for the highest shelf because she was too short to grab what she needed. The park where they once spent an afternoon laughing, walking hand in hand before any of this had happened. But avoiding memories didn't erase them. They haunted her in the smallest ways. The way a song played on the radio, and she instinctively reached for her phone to send it to him, only to remember that she couldn't. the way she still turned to his side of the bed in the middle of the night, expecting him to be there. But he wasn't, and he never would be again. She didn't hear from him. There were no angry texts, no last words, no attempts at closure. He had simply walked away and never looked back. And maybe that was the worst part. She had hurt him, broken his trust, and yet he was the one who got to move on. One day she saw a picture. A mutual friend had posted it, not realizing the impact it would have. It was him, smiling, standing beside someone new. A woman who looked happy, a woman who wasn't her. Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment she let herself believe that maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was just a casual photo, a fleeting moment. But deep down she knew he had let go. She had spent so much time drowning in regret, wishing she could undo everything, that she never stopped to think about what he was doing. He was moving forward, and she was the one stuck in the past. She used to think she had control, that she could juggle two lives without losing either of them, that she could keep a secret without consequences. But choices have consequences. And some betrayals don't get forgiven. She had destroyed something that could never be repaired, and now she had to live with it. She had thought she was chasing something better, but in the end she had lost everything. Some losses are forever, and this one was hers.